Chapter 6. Young Guru. Through the open windows, the booming sound of drums drifted into the classroom, causing a restless stir among the students. Huge drums that could be heard for miles. They were being tuned and warmed up for that evening's Ram Leela festival in Mahabir village, where the school was located, about a mile from my home. The week-long pageant depicted the entire epic of the Ramayana. I had been daydreaming of India, trying to imagine the village a pundit had told me I had lived in during my previous life. Now the rhythmic beat of the drums gave my imagination fresh stim, ulus. I saw myself as Rama, then as Hanuman, the monkey god, fighting against the evil Ravana. By contrast, school seemed so dull. Why was I, Lord of the universe, one with Brahman and of his essence, suffering through another less sun in English grammar? I hardly heard a word the teacher was saying. I was only 11, but already many people were bowing before me, laying gifts of money, cotton cloth, and other treasures at my feet, and hanging garlands of flowers around my neck at religious ceremonies. Should I quit school and go back to the temple for more intensive religious training? Nani and Aunt Ravati both advised against it, but the temptation was strong, especially on hot afternoons like this in a stifling classroom. My long hours of meditation and other religious practices left little time or energy for school. When the last bell sounded, I ran joyfully from the classroom. Accompanied by several admirers, I ran toward the market square, eager to be among the first to reach the site of the festivities. The booming of drums grew louder as we hurried on. "I want you to be my guru, Rabbi." The earnest declaration came from Ramjit, whose parents were of the Kshatriya caste like Nana had been. His father was a foreman in the cane fields and wore the khaki cork hat of an overseer with pride. "And mine," added Mohan, a very religious boy who regularly attended the Sandhya group where I was devoutly involved and helped to instruct young Hindus in their religious duties. Mohan's father was a Vaisya and a wealthy wholesaler of sugar from the nearby factory where my father had once worked as a technician before his marriage. I smiled, pleased with their eagerness. "I can't talk about it and run so fast," I said between deep breaths. My chest had been paining me lately, and I knew it was due to my heavy smoking. "We go talk about it when we get there," I added breathlessly. Already in my town, there were many who looked to me for spiritual help. One day I would be the guru for thousands. The narrow, rutted streets of Mahabir village, lined with the cane workers' small mud huts and dirt-floored wooden shacks, were already crowded. We hurried past the brightly decorated shops to the large, open field in the center of the village. Here, each evening, the dramatization of a portion of the Ramayana was being enacted. Vendors, calling out their wares to the noisy, jostling crowd, were selling drinks and sweets and spicy foods from temporary booths, pushcarts, and bicycle trays, or from large bowls and trays spread on the ground and filled with bera and mango chutney, curry chana, fried chana, and various Indian sweets like jalebi. Here and there, a fortune teller or palm reader squatted on the edge of the crowd, laying out cards or diagrams of the hand, attracting clusters of customers and the curious around them. I had plenty of spending money. In a locked cupboard at home, I kept the accumulating cash of money from the gifts being laid at my feet by worshippers. Some pundits were among the wealthiest of Hindus. Already I was learning how quickly and effortlessly the money piled up. Poorer P0 of lower castes were often the largest source of a pundit's income. One pundit I knew specialized in good luck pujas for winning lotteries and sweepstakes and accumulating wealth. The poor who regularly paid his fees remained poor, while he grew wealthy and could always point to himself as proof that his magical powers worked. I was in the very front row of spectators that evening when the pundit blew a long, deep blast on the conch and pronounced his blessing to signal the start of the pageant. The opposing armies, played by men of high caste, already lined up impressively in colorful costumes at either end of the field, now began their dancing approach toward each other in time with the deep booming of the drums. Evil Ravana had stolen Rama's wife, Sita, who was played by a young man dressed up in a brightly colored sari because no women were allowed to participate. Hanuman, the monkey king and real hero of the story, had discovered where Sita was being held captive. Rama and his brothers and supporters, joined by Hanuman and his monkey army, were pitted against the power of Ravana and his evil cohorts. What an imposing and colorful spectacle it was as they fought back and forth to the accompaniment of the huge tassas' martial beat and the shrill shouts of the spectators. I loved every minute of it, and easily forgot that at school I fancied myself to be a young Mahatma Gandhi, keeping peace between the Hindus and Muslims, who otherwise were prone to engage in name-calling and fistfights. "Non-violence is the duty of all castes," I often exhorted the Hindu boys, and generally they would obey me as their spiritual leader. But at the Ram Leela festival, I, and hundreds of other vegetarians for non-violence, exulted in the exploits of Hanuman and Rama on the battlefield, and the more violent the participants could make it appear, the better we liked it. My mother had carefully taught me the epic's spiritual message, that Rama represented good and Ravana evil. The battle they fought depicted the constant conflict between good and evil within the heart of every man. In the festive atmosphere and under the spell of those drums, I could forget for a few moments. But when I returned home late that night, accompanied by Shanti, Sandra, Ananda, and Amar, I had to face once again the struggle between good and evil that was raging in my own heart. Why should I sense this conflict between good and evil when all was one? It puzzled me. Brahman was the only reality. All else was illusion. Then surely the evil Ravana was Brahman also, just as Rama, the avatar, was Brahman. And so was I. In my yogic trances, I was the Lord of the universe, with no problems, noun rest, no uncertainty. The trick was to retain this transcendent consciousness when I was not meditating. Perhaps the only hope was to do as my father had done, withdraw entirely from this world of illusion. But then how could I be a guru and teach others? Aunt Revati's youngest child, Amar, was one of my best pupils. Only 5, he reminded me of myself at that age, which may have been why I was so fond of him. Already he was doing his own puja, offering water to the sun each morning and showing signs of unusual religious zeal. I was training him in meditation and teaching him special mantras, and in turn, he held me in the highest esteem. "You ain't looking so well these days, Rabbi. I so worried about your health," Ma told me solemnly the next morning when I sat down to visit with her just before leaving for school. "You look so pale and you coughing so much." "Nothing wrong with me, Ma," I insisted. "I am okay." Here I was taken by a sudden fit of coughing that doubled me over. "Rabbi, your Uncle Kumar will have to take you to a doctor before he go to England." "Nothing wrong, Ma," I managed to say, gasping for breath. How my chest ached, especially around my heart. "I will be all right. You coughing so much for weeks now. I does hear you every night." "It ain't nothing at all. Don't worry, Ma. Everybody does cough. How you feeling today?" Ashamed of myself, I wanted to change the subject, fearful that she might suspect the truth. I had been smoking heavily in secret for months, certain that Ma and my aunts and uncles would strongly object if they knew, and the habit was now beyond my power to break. I often thought how strange it was that I was so strict about my vegetarianism. I wouldn't buy cheese in a shop if it had been cut with a knife that had been used to cut sausage or other meat. And yet I couldn't stop smoking, even though I knew it was ruining my lungs. Out in the fields alone, I chain-smoked one cigarette after another, inhaling deeply with every puff. And worst of all, because I didn't want anyone to know of my secret habit, I had to steal the cigarettes, even though I had plenty of money, and that troubled my conscience deeply. Truly, the battle between Ravana and Rama was raging within my own soul, and I seemed helpless to affect the outcome. Ravana was winning in spite of my fervent prayers to Hanuman. For the first time, as I walked to school that day, I felt a hollowness inside when I received the usual greeting, Sita, Ram, Pandit Ji, from admirers. It wasn't so much my conversation with Ma, knowing I had lied to her, that bothered me. I was preoccupied with a distressing experience that had happened earlier that morning. Holding a small brass cup or lota of holy water in one hand for a purification offering, I had just placed a fresh hibiscus bloom on our cow's head, which I did every morning and was bowing in worship, when suddenly, with a warning snort, the big black creature lowered her head and charged. I jumped back, barely avoiding a tossing horn, then turned to run, dropping the lota and prayer beads. My God was chasing me. Fortunately for me, I hadn't yet untied the cow. Her rope pulled her up short just as I thought her horns were going to impale me. Shaken and breathless, I looked from the trampled lota and beads and angrily pawing hooves to those big brown eyes staring at me with intense hatred. attacked by my god, and I had worshipped her faithfully for an hour each day for years. On my way to school, 2 hours after this had happened, I was still shaking inside, no longer with fright, but with bewildered grief. Why? Though Shiva and Kali and so many of the other gods often frightened me, the cow was one god I had always adored. Grazing and caring for her was the one chore I had delighted in. I had always treated the cow and all other animals with the utmost kindness. Then why should this god attack me? It was a question that would continue to haunt me in the days ahead. Even Goseen couldn't settle this one.